And we're back. This is Will Focus, and I want to thank you for joining me again for another Adobe Illustrator tutorial. We are getting into our quick tips. Yay! I know, finally. Everybody's been asking for them, and I'm finally making my quick tip tutorials. The reason I'm doing these is so that you can now utilize the tool tutorials and practical use tutorials and the how to draw tutorials and start developing stuff. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create art. And all of the quick tips will revolve around creating some kind of art, something that you can utilize either in creating a general art piece or something you can continue to use going forward, whether it's, patterns or any type of artwork that can be utilized as a form of stock art, whatever the case may be. So today we're going to cover Frankenstein. And why is that? Because we're in the month of October. And what's in October? Drum roll, please. Halloween. I know that was like so anticlimactic. But anyway, so we're going to develop Frankenstein, and we're going to develop him as a sort of cartoon art. The purpose of that is only to utilize for the holiday season. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is you want to go and do some type of search for Frankenstein. So that way you have an image you can work off as a reference. Reference only. We are not copying, we are not tracing, not live trace or manual trace. This is only for reference purposes. And you don't want to have your artwork resembling somebody else's artwork. So I've gotten my image of Frankenstein, and the whole purpose is so that I can analyze it and we can discuss the anatomy of Frankenstein. So some of the things that you see that are synonymous with Frankenstein, and I'm just going to zoom in on him so we have a clearer view, are his eyebrow ridge, his thin lips, his scar on his forehead, and the bolt in his neck. He also has very squared features. His head is almost tilted upward to show that he's looking down on you. It just expresses his size and how massive he actually is. And he almost has a very dopey, unintelligent look to him. Now, you want to make sure that you keep these particular features consistent in developing Frankenstein. The only purpose behind that is so that you can manipulate and change other features, but still maintain the overall feel and atmosphere that Frankenstein brings. So let's get started. Now, knowing that Frankenstein has squared features, I'm going to start off with a rounded rectangle. Now, I'm not going to be explaining the tools to you in this because we already have practical use and learn to use tutorials which teach you all the tools, as well as the learn to draw tutorials which teach you how to implement them in drawing. Right now we're just going to create from scratch. I may explain a couple of shortcuts as I go along, but they will be very brief. If you need to get any other information on tools, just check out the relative tool tutorial and then come back to this one. Okay, so I'm going to grab me a rounded rectangle. I'm going to go to my shape panel, go down a rounded rectangle, and I'm going to click and drag out a rounded rectangle. And I'm going to make sure that I align this to the artboard, center it vertically and horizontally, and then I'm going to make sure that my stroke is thick enough that I can actually see this on the board. So I made my stroke 10 points. I'm going to get rid of my fill, and I'm going to zoom in a bit, and then what I want to do is I want to make sure my rulers are visible. So Command or Control R, and I'm going to drag down a guide. Now the guide's going to stop somewhere around here. Now the purpose of this is so that I can place anchor points on my actual rounded rectangle to represent where the jawline curves. So I'm going to get my Add Anchor Point tool. I'm going to click and add an anchor point to each point where that guide is. And just to make sure they're aligned properly, I'm going to highlight them, click Align to Selection, and then I'm going to click the top button to make sure that they are all aligned to one another, or both aligned to one another by the top. Now that I have this, I'm going to select my bottom portion, these anchor points only. And I can hide with Command or Control semicolon my guide right now because I don't need to see it. And then I can go to the Scale tool, double click it, drag that tool so that I can see it, click Preview, and we're going to remain with scale, strokes, and effects off because we don't want that to change anything. We're going to go to non-uniform because we want to pull these in to give the shape of the actual jawline. So I'm going to go to horizontal. I'm going to use the shift key and the down arrow to change how far I want that to go in horizontally. I'm going to 60%. I'm going to click OK. Now I want to get rid of these anchor points because they're too curved and it's weird. So I'm going to get my remove anchor point tool. I'm going to click there and here and remove those. I also want to bring these anchor points down just a little bit more. And then with that said, I also want to bring these in more. So I'm going to highlight them again, essentially repeat the process and make sure that my horizontal is at a sufficient amount and click OK. Now that I have this set the way that it is, I want to make these corner points smoother. So I'm going to turn my guides back on, Command or Control semicolon, and then I'm actually going to go to View, Guides, and you can unlock your guides by pressing the Command Option and semicolon or Command Alt semicolon keys, and we're going to go here and do that. We're going to use this and drag our guide down to this point right here. Actually, we're going to drag it a little bit lower because we're going to curve this section, and in order to do it, we need to know where our handle is going to stop, and that's how I govern it. So I'm going to click here, click Shift or C on the keyboard, and this is actually going to allow me to get my Convert Anchor Point tool. I'm going to click, hold the Shift key so that it remains constrained, and bring my handle down to that guide. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. And you got to be careful to actually grab the anchor point itself and not the line segment because it will screw everything up. So anyway, here we are. Now I have the curvature for the jaw. Now if I wanted to, I can harden that up, but we'll get to that later. Now, we know Frankenstein's head is generally larger at the top than it is at the actual bottom. So we're going to grab all of this now that we have, and let's lock our guide again so that doesn't get selected. We're going to grab these points, we're going to go to the scale tool, and we're going to bring it in just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. And then we're going to, let's release our guide again, and we're going to select that guide, and we're going to drag that guide upward, say to about here. I think his eyebrow ridge, from the top of his forehead to the eyebrow ridge, takes up maybe about 35% of his head. So let's go to about here. And we're going to place some anchor points there. And let's lock our guide again. So let's place some anchor points there, there, and let's again highlight them. Make sure that we align the selection and align to the top so that they're equidistant in terms of their level. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag out, and now we don't have to worry about being precise at this point. I'm just going to drag out a little bit to give some formation to the head. Let's pull it back a little bit more. All right. Now we'll go back with that one. Okay. So now I have this area making more of his head shape, where we know the eyebrow ridge can then start here. We can get our nose line here, mouth line here, and this will represent the chin area. Okay, so I also want to get his cheekbones, which I do notice are relatively chiseled and out there. So I'm going to grab another guide and bring it here. This guide, and let's make sure the guides can be moved. This guide here is going to represent right at the top part of the cheekbone. This guide is going to represent the middle portion of the cheekbone, which protrudes, and it comes out farther than the jaw. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to put anchor points at each of these points. So let's lock these guides again. Place an anchor point there, another one there, here, and then here. At this point, we don't have to keep everything aligned. We can just start manipulating. I'm going to click this because I know I want it to actually come out or stay in at this point, but come out here. So I'm going to click this one outward, and I'm going to do the same thing for this one. and click it outward. And that way we see that the shape still goes almost in a trapezoid manner towards the top. And I'm going to bring the top of the skull out just a little bit more. So I'm going to highlight these, go to scale. I'm going to go in the opposite direction this time. Just make it a little bit bigger. Click OK. All right. So now I have the shape of Frankenstein's head. Now I can get rid of these guides and make them disappear. The next thing I'm going to do is start creating some of the features, just blocking them in. So let's create a line for the eyebrow ridge. We know we wanted the ridge to start essentially where this curves inward. So let's go up to this anchor point, which is right here. Let's just click across and make a thick line. Okay, so this is going to be our line for his eyebrow ridge. The next thing we want to do is we want to make a line that represents where his nose is. So let's make one. I'm sorry, I didn't close that. You can either hit the P button or the Command button. If you hold it down and then click, it will actually deselect your line. I'm going to then click and make a line for the nose. Command click off, and then I'm going to click and make a line for the mouth. Now I'm keeping these lines straight by holding the Shift key while I'm clicking them. It keeps it straightened along the path. Now, we know that Frankenstein is more so looking upward. So what we want to do is we want to have a portion of this line actually lift up. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click right here where I feel is the center, and I'm going to lift that line upward. Just at that point. And then I'm going to get my Convert Anchor Point tool, and I'm going to change the shape of the line to more represent his eyebrow ridge. And you can continue to move that point upward. And then what I like to do is to make sure it's in the middle. I click this. You always have to make sure there's an extra anchor point. And I would click and highlight these 3 points and make sure that I go to Align to Section, and I'm going to distribute middle so that this is aligned in the middle. And then I can get rid of this last anchor point. It will not do it if you highlight all 3 of these. It just doesn't do it because it needs a reference point. Once you have this, and I'm going to do this again to make it a harsher curve on the edges of the eyebrow ridge, we can then lift up a little bit more, and now we have the eyebrow ridge at an arc. All right. The next thing we want to do is we want to create the same effect for the nose. Now, for the nose, because we're going to use basic shapes for this, I'm going to know that this is the base of my nose. So I'm referring to this area. So I want another curve that's going to represent the nose itself. And I can do that by the same way I did the other. I can click here. I'm going to give myself that other line so that way I can distribute these evenly. Make sure that's in the middle. And what we're going to do right now, I'm going to align all of these things to the middle of the artboard to make sure they're all aligned properly. Okay, now these are all aligned to one another. I have this point, and it is centered. I'm going to get rid of this end point here. I'm going to select this middle point. I'm going to click up. I'm going to use the Convert Anchor Point tool. Click outward. And now I have an upward shaped nose, more round in this display. So that way it looks similar to Frankenstein's overall perspective. Doesn't have to look identical. Of course, that's not what we're going for. We're just going for a quick creation of Frankenstein. Now, what we can do is the same thing for this. Point in the middle. I'm going to add an extra anchor point. Highlight these 3. Align them and distribute to the middle by aligning to selection. Get rid of this anchor point. Lift this up just a little bit. Use the Convert Anchor Point tool and give him a frown. All right, so now we have his frown, his nose, and his eyebrow ridge. Now we need to create eyes. So what we're going to do is we're going to create one eye. We're going to make a circle. Use a circle. So we go and grab the ellipse tool, create an eye here. I'm going to bring that over. And we notice that his eyes are almost cut off. So I'm going to click this eye using the Pathfinder tool. So you can just make a shape that clips across the eye. You're going to select these two shapes, go to your Pathfinder section. In shape modes, you're going to minus the front, and that's going to get rid of that top portion of the eye. And just for us to be safe, what we're going to do is we're going to actually duplicate this eye by using our reflect tool, the letter O. We're going to click in the middle, and you can find this in the Transform Tools tutorial section. And we're going to make sure that we flip this to the other side, and now we have our eye. Okay, so we have two eyes, the nose, the mouth. Now, what are the other things that we find that are synonymous? The bolt in the neck. Well, unfortunately, I don't plan on making a neck for Frankenstein, so I'm going to put the bolt in his head. Now, the bolt only has to go in one side and out the other, so I'm going to use a regular, let's use a rounded rectangle again. And I'm going to go here, and I'm going to click so that, let's say the bolt on this side is going to be a little bit longer over here than it is over here. So we're going to shift this just a little bit. And let's, I'm going to grab the Alt key or Option key, and I'm going to constrain it and pull it inward just to make it a little bit smaller. Now, I'm going to grab the outside shape of the head because we want this to look like it's going through the head. So it's going to have to cut this shape off. We're going to paste it in front after we've copied it, select both shapes, and then go to remove the front item. And now we have these two shapes in the back. All right, so this will represent the look of the bolt going through the head. Now, the bolt on this side has a little screw base. So what we got to do is we got to grab another rounded rectangle and make it a little bit bigger. And we can change, of course, the shape of the actual rounded rectangle. And let's make it a little rounded on the edges, but not too rounded. And then we're going to combine these two shapes. So let's actually remove these from one another as a group. So we're going to go Command-Shift-G. And now we can select just this piece and this piece together, and then combine them. So we click the Unite button, and now we have the bolt on this side. And we're starting to get a more Frankenstein-shaped face. So what we can do from here, if we want, is we can start to make the scar. Now in making the scar, we just click and make something. I'm using the pen tool. And again, we want something more blocky in nature, so it doesn't actually have to be, you know, perfect. But we want to represent a scar. Let's make something with stitches. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a line. We're going to semi-curve that line. And then we're going to create a blend of strokes. It's going to be a simple blend. We're going to create one point to another, one line segment. And we're going to copy by holding the Alt and Shift key and dragging it down. And we're going to reduce the stroke size of this. So let's change it to maybe 3. All right. And then we're going to hit Command or Control Alt B to blend. We're going to go to Object, Blend, and Blend Options. We're going to click Preview, change to Specified Steps, and reduce the amount that we have here. We want enough where it looks like stitches, but we don't want too much where it just looks like some weird pattern. So now we have our blended lines, and what we're going to do is let's make them even less thick. So let's reduce the width. Okay, and we're going to take these and we're going to copy this as our actual spine for this. And we're going to go to paste. Let's paste that same shape behind it. And then we're going to select this blend again. Let's get that blend selected. And we're going to go to Object, Blend, Replace Spine. And it will automatically replace the spine it originally had with the one that we selected for it now. Now let's select that again, and we're going to cut it So Command or Control X, and we're going to reduce the size of this line so that way it's not overpowering our stitches. So I brought mine down, let's say to 5, and then I'm going to Command or Control F and paste in front to get our stitches back. And now we have our stitches again. So we have our stitches, our screw, eyebrow ridge. And now we can start manipulating it just a little bit to make it look more like Frankenstein. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to go to my stroke panel, I'm going to change the stroke type, and I'm going to use this width profile. And I'm going to increase this so that we have more of a thick eyebrow ridge and it's wedged. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to change the thickness of the eyes. Let's bring those down. I'm going to change this to a fill for the nose. So we can hit the Shift and X key and it will change that to a fill. And then in addition, let's bring the eyebrow ridge even further down. Bring the eyes up a little bit. Let's say we select both of these and bring those up, but not too far up, of course. And we are going to bring this down all together again with the eyes and the eyebrow ridge. This is just going to help us figure out our adjustments so that everything works out for us. Okay, so now we have the eyebrow ridge, the eyes, and I want to actually bring the eyes closer together. So I'm holding the Shift key and I'm bringing them in with the arrow key about one space, and I'm going to lift this one up just a bit. And now we have our eyes. Now, in addition to this, we may want to represent the shape of the nose by bringing lines that connect to the eyebrow ridge. So I'm going to grab my pen tool again. I'm going to click on, let's zoom in. I'm going to click on a corner point, and I'm going to drag this all the way up, and we're going to pull that right there. Now what I want to do is I'm going to create a similar point on the other side. I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag that up. Let's make sure it's right there. And let's pull that over just a little bit so it looks more even. Now, I hate when things look disconnected, and this looks disconnected. So I'm going to highlight these two. And I'm going to go to my stroke profile, and I'm going to select Width Profile 4, and I'm going to flip it so that way the edges look like they touch directly. So now I have the nose and the eyebrow ridge of Frankenstein. Let's move on. Next, we want to look at the mouth. Now, the mouth, I'm going to kind of do what I did with the nose. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to make an arched profile for the mouth. Now, what I want to do is I also want it to be visible that this mouth is actually, let's say, a mouth and not just a line. So I'm going to give it some of the shape of what it would actually have if it were a mouth. So I'm going to expand this. I'm going to go to Object, Expand Appearance, and now we have an expanded stroke. And you know what? It looks complicated, so I'm going to go to Object, Path, Simplify. I'm going to click Preview, and I'm going to look at how my path is simplified. Right now, I can keep my curve precision all the way up, and I can reduce the threshold. And originally there were 61 points, and now there are only 21. So I'm going to click OK and keep that. Now we have a fill instead of a stroke, and I can use shapes like a circle, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click, drag out a circle, make sure that it's aligned to the center of the actual artboard. And then I'm going to pull it down just a little bit to represent the arch of the upper lip. And I'm going to remove that from that piece. So now we have this set. Now let's grab all of these. Let's make sure this is aligned to the center of the artboard. Same thing for this. And see, this is where the alignment comes into play. So let's grab this and the eyes, and we're going to group those together for now. I'm going to align that to the center of the artboard. And now it's more evenly aligned. And now I can select those, Command-Shift-G, and ungroup them, so now they're their individual parts. Come out, we still have our Frankenstein skull, or what appears to be our Frankenstein skull so far. So, now that we have this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make more of an angle for the eyebrow arch. That ridge, to me, needs to be more angled. So I'm going to click here, click plus for the add anchor point on your keyboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift C. I'm going to adjust the curvature so that it's more square. I'm going to do the same thing around the same area for this side. And then adjust the curvature so that it's more squared as well. So this is more representative of that shape itself. Now, I also want this part of the jaw, now that I'm looking at it, to come in a bit more. So I'm going to shift click once and twice, and then shift click once and twice again. And now I'm going to get more of a squared, blocky, chiseled head. What I also am learning and would like to do now is I kind of want to give, and let's cut this for now. So Command X, and do not, actually let's highlight both of them. Let's group them together, Command G, Command X, and get rid of it. And we're going to select these points. Actually, let's select these points from the top of the actual bolt to the top of the head, and we're going to drag them inward. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other side, being mindful not to touch the anchor points that are on this portion of the bolt. And I'm going to drag that in twice. Now, it may mess up the way that this is built out in your shape. So grab these anchor points and pull them inward some. And same thing on this side, pull it in. And we're going to grab this shape again, copy it. Actually, let's copy it, and we don't have to worry about the stitches. We're going to remake those later. And we're going to paste in front, and we're going to make sure that we subtract the front from that object, and the same on this one. Paste in front of it, copy them both, or select them both, and then minus the front on that object. So now we have our shape again. And this is starting to look more like a Frankenstein. Now, Frankenstein also has hair. Because of what we're creating, we can just create hair on top, and this will allow us to actually shape his head even more than what we already have. So we're going to keep everything very, very squared and blocky, and try to stay as close to the middle as possible, because we're going to duplicate this shape that we're creating. So just get something that looks similar to this, and we're going to switch it to an actual fill and not a stroke. And let's make sure that the top anchor points are aligned to one another. And then we are going to get this, and we're going to reflect it while holding the Alt key and Shift key down, and then drag it in if it's not evenly to the center. Then we will select both parts, and then we will unite them so that they're one piece. And then what we can do is we can actually get rid of that center point, and now we have an even high top for Frankenstein. Now, if we want to add details, like let's say we want to make the eyes squintier, we can select anchor points and we can pull them up to make him look even more squinty. That way we understand that he's supposed to look a certain way with his eyes. And we can grab this eyebrow ridge because it's not going to go that far down. And we can grab both anchor points and pull them up just a little bit. But then we can, after we have both selected, go back to our scale tool go to horizontal, and reduce it to a point that we feel looks best for us. And then we can click OK. Now, if we want to make these points larger, we can select the eyes and the eyebrow ridge, group them, hit E on our keyboard for our scale tool, or our free transform tool. Hold the Shift and Alt key while we're doing this, and scale it up a bit. Make it a little bit bigger. Now, let's actually increase the eyebrow ridge. So we're going to Command Shift G, grab the eyebrow ridge, and we're going to expand the appearance. I'm going to go to Object, Path, Simplify again, keep the curve precision, click OK, and then I'm just going to grab the points that I want to pull up to make it look bigger than what it actually was. So for me, let's grab this as an anchor point. Let's get rid of that one. Let's grab this, pull it out. I'm going to get rid of some of these anchor points. And adjust. Pull this to the middle and even bring that up. Now, let's say I want to make him look a little sinister. I can actually arch it so that it angles downward to give him more of a menacing appearance. And then we can pull back. And again, symmetry doesn't matter once you start to customize it. You can just start to adjust the bits and pieces of the actual image that you want a certain way. So I want his cheekbones, but I don't want them so harsh. And I want to represent his actual mouth bulge. So we're going to click here and here. Let's give him two little points that'll represent the mouth bulge. And we're going to reduce the size of these. And I'm going to actually change them so that they are rounded capped, but also smaller in terms of their size. So it's just representing the mouth bulge itself. And then I'm going to give him a chin line. Let's go and click here and here. Let's click there, add an anchor point in the middle. This is something we've been doing continuously. Highlight these 3 points. We're going to go to Align to Selection, distribute them evenly, get rid of that last anchor point, Shift C to change our anchor point to a curved point, and then we're going to arch it up a little bit. I'm going to make sure this is aligned to the middle of the actual artboard. And then we're going to increase this just a little bit in terms of its size. And then let's change the width profile so that it looks like this. All right, so now we have this version of our Frankenstein. And you can start adding the, let's say we add the scar back. If you remember, we created a line that represented the shape of the scar. Then we created line segments, and we did a blend of those line segments. We changed the blend options, specified the size and steps, and right now it's really hot, so we're going to go down really low, and we're going to click OK. We're going to reduce the distance between them, and let's also change their width. We're going to bring these up. Let's change this, make it a little bit bigger. 3 points, copy this, and we are going to paste behind it, copy it again, or select it again, go to Object, blend, and then replace spine, and then it will adjust to that actual spine. And we can change the actual size of the strokes that are within that by simply selecting them inside of our blend. Alright, so now we have our little scar, we have the bolt, we have the eyebrow ridge, and the blocky features. Now this is a very basic, super basic Frankenstein. And you can, if you decide to go a little bit further, you can start to shade in. You can add pupils. Let's say we wanted to add pupils, just to give him a darker look in his eyes. Make sure they're filled black. If you want to give him a crazed, cockeyed look, you can do that as well. We can also give him lines under his eyes to make him look even more aged and weathered. Let's change our width profile. Let's duplicate that. And we also know that he has a very, very long profile for the side of his actual mouth mound. This curves under like this, and then this curves upward. So we're going to make some adjustments. We're going to do this. Again, change the width profile. Hit our O button, reflect, bring that over here. Adjust it so that it looks even for us. Then we can give him some stress lines in his forehead if we wanted to. We can make those a little curved. Again, same thing we did before. We're just going to keep these a little even. So we're going to go over here. Line of selection, distribute to the middle. Get rid of this anchor point. Change this actual curve slightly. Change the actual profile. We can actually use this profile because it'll give it some variation. And then we can align these however we want. They don't have to be to the center. If we want, we can choose like another width profile for it. Change the size. And now we're starting to look more like a Frankenstein. Okay, let's lift this cheekbone up just a little bit. So let's get this to be a little more sharper by lifting it up. That'll block out our features even a little bit more. So let's do that. And right now, it's coming together. And we can start to add little things to give it more details. Like right now, we know he has this scar. We know we have the features. We can add the ears if we wanted, but I just want the head, like the face shape. We can change his hair. For instance, we can take this and let's select, let's go down to our width tool profile and we'll go to, let's scallop it. Matter of fact, you know what we'll do? We'll roughen this instead of doing that. So we're going to grab this, and we're going to go to Effect, Distort and Transform, and we're going to go to Roughen. And we're going to click the preview button, and you'll see that it starts to roughen it, but of course, there's absolute and there's relative. I'm going to select absolute because it's not as drastic. And we're going to click, let's click corner, and let's keep the detail, let's make the detail a little high. But let's make the size smaller. More detail, smaller size. Let's raise it up just a little bit and click OK. And now we'll see that he has more ridges across his hair. So it makes him look roughed. In addition, his hair in this particular photo goes down behind his ears, but because we don't have the ears showing, we're just going to leave it like this. So now we have these parts of his mouth. We also want to add, let's add a mouth mound that connects to these lines. If you notice, right about here, there's a bulge, and that goes in from the chin curve and upward. So we're going to get this, we're going to click, we're going to round that out just a little bit, make it a stroke, change its type, change the size of it, and then we're going to duplicate that and move it to the other side as well. So let's duplicate it, make sure we hit the O button, reflect with the Alt key, and now we have it there. And what we can do so that it doesn't look like it's going directly into the chin, we can lift it up just a little bit to make it right above that area. And then let's make these smaller. So we're gonna grab our scale tool, go to uniform, change the size, click OK, and then I'm going to select them and make them even smaller, make it a 2, bring them back out, and then that makes that mound look even better. Now, our chin at the bottom is even smaller when we think about how long his actual cheek comes down. So we're going to drop these points, and I did 2 for that one. Let's do 2 for this one. And I'm going to bring this in 1 over, and then we're going to bring it over 1 again. And I don't want such a harsh shape for his nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use one of our tools that's in the With Tool option box, and it's the Warp tool. And I'm going to hold down my Alt key and adjust it so that it's just a little bit smaller. Now, depending upon the strength that I'm using, it may or may not give me the effect I want, at which point I can double click and figure out how I want this to look. So I'm going to drag this out so I can just get the shapes of the actual nose itself. And then Command click off. Let's select it again. We're going to go back to our warp, and we're just going to drag this out just till it looks more along the lines of what we're looking for. Now, again, this does not have to be even. I'm just doing this to give you a quick rundown of what we can do in terms of making it look a certain way. And I'm also going to do that to the top portion of this as well. So let's get rid of that. And that way, he'll look like he has more of an actual nose instead of just a shape that was laid there. Now, we can also add additional lines if we want to for the cheek, just like we did before. And we can do the same thing, increase the stroke, change the stroke profile. We can select that, hit the O button, reflect it using the Alt and Shift key, and then adjust left and right if we need. And this gives us more of our detail. But again, I'm just using this as a reference. But you notice I'm just keeping these features to make him look more mongoloid. That I've added these lines for the cheek, I think I still want more lines under his eyes. Just maybe one more set, because I don't want it to look too realistic. Again, I want it cartoony, but I do still want to have them under his eyes so that it does indeed look more weathered, more aged. So I'm going to give it 3 points. I'm going to change the width profile, select it, O, reflect it while it's copied, bring it down a little bit, and now I have that more weathered appearance again. And let's bring another line just to outline the eyebrow ridge and the forehead. I'm going to make these thicker so that way they look more like they're supposed to be indented. I'm going to select it, O button. Let's pull this in a little bit closer. O button. So we're here, Alt key, and I'm going to move that over just a little bit. Let's move this over maybe 1. I can grab that, move that over 1. There we go. So more of a Frankenstein look for the overall appearance. I can always, if I've used a filter, I can take that filter off and let's say go to our appearance menu, drag that filter to the trash icon, and now he has his regular head back. What I want to do now is I'm actually going to give him more height in his head. And I'm going to bring those points in. Now I'll bring them a little bit outward, just a little bit. So we'll go to non-uniform, we'll go to horizontal, and we will increase it just a bit. I want more of a curve going towards it. So what I'm going to do is use my convert anchor point tool, get each of these points. Let's see. And make sure that I curve them how I want it in terms of it going into the next point. And then if we wanted, we can also lift these 3 points up higher to give more of his forehead away. And then of course, this, which is the underlying piece, we can place an anchor point in the middle there, select that point and lift that up higher so that way it looks and appears as if it's behind the head. So now we have a basic Frankenstein. What I like to do is I take these and all of the outer shapes. So let's take this and this, as well as this, and I like to combine that, let's say into one shape. So we're gonna paste those behind, go to our Pathfinder and unite those shapes, change them to a stroke. But you know what, before we do that, I can see that right here in mine, I have to get rid of this. So that way it doesn't mess up what I'm about to do. And I'm going to change it to a stroke. Make sure it's in back, so Command Shift and your left bracket. And then I'm going to change it to an outer stroke, a line stroke to outside. I'm going to round the edges, and then I'm going to increase this to give it a thicker appearance. I want it to almost appear as if it's a sticker. So now I have that as the appearance of my actual Frankenstein head. Also, if you want this appearance, you can start to change the profiles of these strokes, and you can almost change them all back to regular ones, like the normal uniform profile. You can change their edges to round, and it will change the appearance so that it's not such a sharp look and it's more playful in terms of the appearance. So that's what I'm going to do right now just to see what it looks like. And then, you know, if we don't like that, we can always change it back. So let's go here. Let's go to our normal profile. Let's change them all to rounded corners. And this is what Frankenstein would look like if that was how his corners were adjusted. I kind of like this look. But I think I'm going to stick with the look we had previously, where everything was pointy, and then leave it at that. But one last thing that you can do if you want to is you can go to Object, you can go to Expand, and it's going to change these to fills and strokes. I'm going to take these and I'm going to change their profile and make them each this specific profile, so they look more like stitches as opposed to just straight lines. I'm going to grab them. Let's grab both of these, and I'm going to squeeze them so that they look a little bit more cramped on his head. Then I'm going to grab this. I want another line, and maybe I don't want it as long, so I'm going to make it a little shorter, but I want it a little thicker on that side. Now I can also, if I decided to, start to shade in and make him more dynamic, because right now he's just a flat object. So if I wanted to, I can grab something here, go here, bring this down. You just got to think about the contours of the actual shape and what they would do if you were to color them in. And if you wanted Frankenstein to actually appear as if he had some depth and or dimension to him. So you see, I've already added a little bit on that side in terms of the dimension and the depth, and you don't have to do this on both sides. You can just do it on one if you decide to, if you want this to come out and look a certain way. So right now I'm just going to see how it looks if I do this only on one side of Frankenstein. So we're going to grab this, go here, grab here, bring it down into this area, bring it around and over here, and then back up. And then we're going to change that. And now we have this shading here. And you can also continue to drag that down and around if you wanted to. Then we can go here, because these lines that we've created are acting as guides for the shape of the actual face itself. And now you're seeing a more dynamic vision of the actual Frankenstein head. It's still more cartoony in nature, but at the same time, it allows you to take this figure and add a little bit more depth to it so that it looks a little bit more interesting. And you could do this to the whole form if you wanted to. It would completely be up to you. It's something that you would have to decide you wanted to do on your own. We could bring this and drag this over so that it kind of goes into the nostril as a shadow. We can actually add more under the eyes so that we have more depth under there. Just any number of things that you can do in terms of adding shading to the Frankenstein piece. Let's go here. We're going to grab this. I'm going to bring it into that. And then we're also going to bring it over here. And here. And let's bring it back here again. Let's bring that around, over here, and bring it back down. So just this. And it's all about fooling around and seeing what you think makes it work and looks better for you. If you want, another quick thing, if you decide, oh, you know, I love the way this looks and I want it on both sides, you can then, what I'm about to do is select all of my fill colors, select object, and I'm going to select, actually same, and I'm going to select fill color. And let's get rid of the ones that we don't want to duplicate. And keep all the pieces that I am going to want to duplicate. And we're going to do like we did in every other portion. And we're going to reflect it. And then just pull it over enough so that it looks like it's tied in together. And then what you can do is you can get rid of pieces that you may or may not like, that you feel highlight or darken too much of the actual Frankenstein figure. And then you can keep the pieces that you do like. But again, totally up to you how you decide to do this. And I'm just going to adjust this a little bit more. Just to get it to a point where I'm like, you know, okay, you guys got it, you understand it, and you can see what you can get if you just start tinkering with it just a little bit. And again, you can pick and choose what you want your entire form to look like just by simply manipulating these shapes. Very, very simple. So, as is, this is my Frankenstein shape. I'm going to, let's give this a little bit of shading. And make this look as if there's some depth to the actual bolt that's in his head. And once you've gotten to a point that you want, you can save if you haven't already. And then you're done. Right now we have a nice little Frankenstein illustration. If somebody was to see this, pretty sure they would understand who and or what Frankenstein is. And then you can utilize this if you wanted to, let's say, do something where you did stock imagery, or you just wanted to create stuff for later use for your own projects. And what I'm going to do is take this information now that you've seen how we've created this piece, and then we're going to utilize that later to show you how to create something in addition. So stay tuned. In the next tutorial, I'm actually going to cover creating something else that might complement this. And then in our third tutorial, which will be underneath this, we'll also discuss how to pull those two things together and make something useful and unique. All right, so thanks again, guys. I'm glad you joined me for this one. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave it in the section below. Also, be sure to like, rate, let me know what you want and what you do not want, and then I'll try and get everything for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care.